My name is Kiri. I'm an Apple certified instructor, and motion is one of the classes that I teach, including Final Cut. And we're currently teaching Final Cut 10 as well as 7. All right, so what we'll do is I told you a little bit about myself. I'm originally from Zimbabwe. I came from a music and audio background, and I went to school in England, and I did audio production. And it was during there that I got introduced to all these Apple products. Back then we had Final Cut. I think we had Final Cut 2. We had Soundtrack Pro. And then eventually Motion was introduced. So I have been using the products for a while, and I've seen them evolve. And then I moved to the US, and I run production, post-production when I'm not teaching. So I get to do some filming, some editing, some motion graphics stuff. So some faces look familiar, some faces I haven't seen them, but we're all welcome. And feel free to ask any questions as we go along. Now, motion, if you're working with Final Cut 7, that suite comes with motion. It comes with Motion 4. And one of the things I like with Final Cut Studio was that motion and Final Cut, including some other applications, you could do round tripping. So right from Final Cut Timeline, you can send a clip to motion, whether you're doing a lower third or whether you're keying green screen. You go into motion and do whatever you do. When you save, your results would ripple back into Final Cut. With Final Cut 10, they're now like separate applications. They don't really sell them as a suite, because now you buy them individually. Final Cut is like $299. Motion is $49, but the price is great. So for $49, you get Motion 5. They also sell a compressor, for $49. So price-wise, you can't beat it. Now, when I used to do projects, I used to do my titles in 7, and it was a little tedious. You didn't have a lot of control, when you're doing titles in Final Cut 7. So it was very restricted. And then I started playing with motion, and I really liked it. The alternative was After Effects. I think someone here says they use After Effects. And motion was like Apple's answer to After Effects as far as doing animation and motion graphics. So some people would actually do their motion graphics in After Effects and then import them into their timeline. And so Apple came up with this program called Motion. And so we'll discuss a few features in Motion. But this is the interface. So, and the one we are showing here is Motion 5. So this is the $49 application. Now, when you're doing motion graphics, you really need a good graphics card. So if you're buying a new computer, you always want to think about that. What's the best graphics card available? And you also need a lot of RAM, so you can do your RAM preview. So you want to make sure that you have as much RAM as you can get. And so this is the interface. So basically, it's just one window. And what you can do is you can go and resize things if you wanted to make one part bigger or the other part smaller. This tab right here is the file browser. So this allows me to browse what's on my system. So if I want to look for files, I want to bring my own content. This is how I can access. So I have documents and movies, and I can drill down to find files that I need. So right now I have it on desktop, and it's showing me the stuff that's in the desktop. And a lot of these functions I just drag and drop, so you can drag things and drop them. Now, this dark window right here is the canvas. So, you know, as a painter, whatever you are creating, this is where you do all your manipulations. And this is where you also see your results of what you are doing. Now, in the middle section, this is where you manage the elements that you're working with. So you have your layers. The way motion works is that everything is contained in a group, and then a group contains layers. So if I bring a picture, I put it in a group, and that picture becomes a layer. So, and you see once we start bringing stuff in here. You can certainly handle audio, so there's an audio tab. You could bring in audio files and add them to your graphics. And then what you have a timeline in this section at the bottom. And so you can see what's in your timeline. You can see the duration of your elements, and you can add markers and so forth. Right here you have your transport section, so you can play and pause. This little red, this is the record animation button. So when you start doing some keyframing, that's the button that you use. And then you have a playhead, just like you do in Final Cut. So while this is not an editing program, the focus is really doing you know, like show openers or titles or lower thirds, you know, simple things like that. But you have a timeline, and so I'm looking here at frames. So depending on your project, you can look at it in frames, or you can switch to timecode if you want it to match whatever you're doing in editing. So if you wanted things to match with your editing timeline, you have the choice to switch between regular SMPTE timecode or your frames. So you can just switch right there. So so what else do we have? So we said the file browser, you can bring in content. If you don't have content and you want to use Motion's content, it comes with a huge library. So you have things like behaviors, you have filters, you have generators. And so I'll get to show some of the stuff that we have. You have things like shapes, just generic shapes, so like a 5-star. Nice thing, you get a little preview window up here. So when you select something, you are not guessing what it looks like. You get a nice preview window. Same thing with things like behaviors. Behaviors are like preset animations. So if you are not big into keyframes, you can still use Motion and use a lot of the preset animations. So for instance, if I go into text sequence, I wanted to put some animation into my text, and I click on where it says arrange in, and it shows you how it's going to do that. So let's start off with some text, and then we can demonstrate how you can spruce up or enhance your text. Very easy to create text in Motion. I love keyboard shortcuts. There's a few that are generic that you can use in Final Cut as well as in Motion. But to go into text, this middle section of the interface, this is where we have our toolbar. And that T stands for our text tool. Or you can just press the letter T. So whenever you have something selected, it lights up blue. So if I wanted to put some text, I can go in there and type. Now when you do text, once you're done texting, texting. Once you're done typing text, if you hit escape, you come out of typing mode. And you get this transformation, these transformation handles. So you can do quite a few things just right there in the canvas. I can position the text wherever I want to. This was hard to do in Final Cut, if you wanted to center your text. Now you're getting these dynamic guides. So if I wanted to center this, I can center it right there. If I wanted to rotate, there's my rotation handle. And I can rotate my text. If you hold down Shift, it snaps to 45-degree increments. So I'll leave it right there. So this is very intuitive. Now if you're doing something for broadcast, you may want your save zones. So you can turn those on. Now I can't really see them because I'm zoomed all the way in at 100%. Now we use Command plus and minus in Final Cut to zoom in and out. So I'm just zooming in and out. And is it a little chilly or is it me? Yeah. I mean, it's always chilly for me. I grew up in the tropics, so it gets really... So we've brought in our text. So how do I manipulate this text? I can make it bigger. Now, if you want to do it right here, you can, if I drag one of these handles. Now, what I'm doing here, I'm actually enlarging it, but I'm also distorting it. That may not be what you want. So Command Z is our friend. We can always undo if you do that. So, but I can increase the text size proportionally. I have to hold down the Option and the Shift. And so now it's not going to distort. And then and I can line it up. And there's my text. Now we also have this little floating window, which is the heads-up display. So this gives you some of the the most used controls. So if you wanted, you could just drag that to resize your text. Tracking, if you want to adjust the distance between letters, you can do that. And if it was a paragraph, then you could do some line spacing, but because this is not a paragraph, I can do some line. You can, if you were mixing different elements, you can play with opacity from 0 all the way to 100%. Now, most of these parameters are keyframeable, so you can have them change over time, and that's how you can achieve interesting effects, whether with opacity or with size, tracking, and things like that.
I have a question. So the font size is 48, but when you zoom it out, that doesn't change the actual font size?
Oh, when I'm just zooming in like this?
Or not when you transformed it. Like if you dragged it there, the font size it's still at 48, right?
Oh, yeah, that stays, yeah, because you're overriding that with, it overrides that.
But that doesn't affect the resolution or anything like that, right?
No, it won't affect resolution. Yep. So we have that. So you can do quick changes right here. So if I wanted to change maybe the color, I can see right here. There's a little color swatch, so I can see the color of my text is white, and then I could pick a different color, just like that. I could make it green if I want. If I want to look at detailed controls, I go into the inspector. One of the easiest way to jump into the inspector is to click this little button, and that takes you into the inspector. So the inspector shows up right here. So you can see all the other controls that are available for you to manipulate. Now, anything that is a diamond, if I hover my mouse, that means it's keyframeable. Those changes can be made over time.
Keyframe, that's different from something you mentioned earlier. You can do something. There's another option, keyframing versus.
Oh yeah, versus behaviors.
Okay.
So, and I'll show you guys both. So if I wanted to keyframe this, so maybe I just want this text to appear maybe from the bottom. So I'll zoom out a little bit. We can do a simple animation. And so what keyframing is basically changes over time. So I can say maybe at the 1 second mark, I want my text to be positioned where it is right now. So, and that's position. So I can look for the property called position in my inspector. And so I can lock that position by just clicking that diamond. And when it turns red like that, it means it's been locked. You've basically taken a snapshot of that position. And then if I go to the beginning, and I want to say at 0, I want it to be off screen. So I could either move my text off screen by just dragging it. And I'm creating a motion path. So that's the path that the text is going to take. So when I rewind this, you can see that's the animation right there. And so I said at 1 second, be positioned. At 0, be off screen. And so it's once you get a hang of it, it's that simple. So when you are planning your motion graphics and you say, oh, I want something to appear, and you say, okay, how long do I want it? Do I want it to be a second or 2 seconds into the timeline? And then you can actually go in there, and it's easy to do your planning that way. So at 0, it's off screen. At 1 second, it appears. And so when you play it back, you have your motion. Mm-hmm.
And this is real time? Because I remember my experience with earlier versions of Motion, and it could have been my computer, is that it tended to be much slower.
A little choppy?
Yeah, or it's like, could have been.
Yeah, actually this is real time.
So
yeah.
1 second equals 1 second.
Yeah, it's actual real time, unless you had a lot of elements and it was overloaded and it's struggling, then the frame per second playback drops, and so you would have to actually render it to see a real-time playback. And that's a good question, because Apple, they pioneered this real-time playback. I mean, After Effects, you mostly had to render stuff to be able to see. You didn't have a real-time playback like this. Yes, sir.
Just looking at the screen again, that bottom area where a group, there are now 2 areas within that timeline. Is that the fact that you've keyframed it?
Actually, this just represents, so the text is sitting in a group. Mm-hmm. So Amherst, that's just that text. In fact, if I go to layers, and so remember I said an element has to belong to a group. So this is the element called text that I created, mm-hmm. and it's sitting inside this group. And you can rename this. You just double click and you, especially if you're working on a big project, where you're gonna generate a lot of elements. If you don't label your things, your layers, then it becomes tricky to get around. But yeah, this is a group. Groups are really powerful because you can group related elements together. And now if I wanted to create another text group, I could duplicate this, which is Command D. And now I have a second group, and I could maybe change the color on this one. Now obviously it's sitting on top of the other one because of layer order. Whatever is at the top obstructs what's below it. But I can move that, and then you begin to see, oh, that could be a drop shadow effect. But I can move that. This is the other nice thing about motion. You can nudge one frame at a time. A little tricky to do in Final Cut, but I can nudge this. I'm just holding Command and I'm using my arrow keys. I can nudge in any direction, to the left or to the right, and so forth. So that's one way. And then I could go in there and let me select the layer, and I can change what the text says. Obviously they had the same animation, but
when you lock a keyframe or something, I don't know what it's called, at the beginning, if you want it to be this certain way off screen, does that have to be locked as well, or is that going to be off screen either way because of the motion line?
Yeah, good question. Now, one of the things that you can do is, well, actually they simplified the process. So at 1 second, that's where I put the keyframe. And this was where I positioned it. And when I said off screen, I dragged it off screen, and the other line that says Amherst. And then I didn't have to log this, but all I did was to change the position of the element. And then that automatically put a keyframe in there. So all you needed was one keyframe and then a change in the position, and that generated another keyframe. So we really have controls. If you've worked with applications like Photoshop where they use layers, it's really the same concept. So you can have layers. If I decide, oh, I don't want to look at this media in red, I can just turn it off, and then it disappears. Now we talked about using behaviors. You know, what are behaviors good for? So we have a whole collection of behaviors. And they have them in different categories. You have behaviors to animate, 3D camera. The ones for text are right down here. So maybe I want this to exit in style, some type of, and they have all kinds. You can spend a whole day just having fun. There's arrange out. You see what it does. Fade characters. So if I like that, I can actually, it's a drag and drop. I'm dragging it, and I drop it right there on my text. Now, it actually went to the beginning of the layer, but I actually want the text to fade out at the end, so somewhere out here. And I can move it. This is the behavior that I applied, and it's got this purple timeline, and I can just drag it, and so you can control the timing of your effects. So I only want it to affect the ending. And I'm controlling the duration. I can trim it by just doing that, and it gets trimmed. So now when I play that towards the end, it will just fade out. So I'm combining keyframe and a behavior.
Is there a way to view where the keyframes are set?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so your keyframes will be in the timeline. As we go up here, we have, it's called a keyframe editor. And so you just have to select the layer with the keyframe, and then you can actually see the actual keyframes. And you can manipulate them, you can move them, you can change the interpolation and so forth. So yeah, you can actually see them. So each element, whatever you're working on, just select the layer, and this heads up updates. So if I'm working on the behavior, now it gives me all these controls, so I can manipulate that. Now, the behavior was taking its time. If I wanted it to happen faster, where's an idea what I need to do?
Shorten.
Yep, so I can shorten this, so it's not going to take as long. So if I wanted it to take its time, then I can make it longer. And then, it's going to take its time versus shortening. So those are some of the basic things that you can do. You can keyframe, or you can use all these behaviors. There's plenty of them on your text. Now the other thing that you can do is you can manipulate your text. Instead of moving or animating the text itself, you can look at the text through a camera, and that takes us into 3D. So when they talk about 3D, because the camera gives you a sense of depth. So I can add a camera to my project, and you see we have a camera icon right there. So when I select that, it's going to say, do you want to switch to 3D? And I say, sure. And now I have a camera. So it's like looking at your stage, looking at the stage through the lens of a camera. What I was doing here, I was manipulating the objects by hand. That's like going to the stage and moving something. Or you could say, instead, I'll just zoom into my element using the camera. So with the camera now active, I get some controls for the camera. And so I can do things like rotate, and just like you would do if you had your camera maybe on a tripod and you're just rotating it. I can zoom in, just like the zoom button on your camera, and you can zoom in and out.
Is this new to Motion 5, or is that in Motion 4?
It's also in Motion 4. I think they added 3D in Motion 3. So you would have that. And now if you look on television or commercials, a lot of the effects that they do are mostly 3D, where things are spinning around or the camera is going through elements. I mean, the possibilities are limitless. So, but the nice thing is that I can actually record the camera movements. So I can go do that, look at it from from above. I'm just doing some random movements. I can zoom in. And all I'm doing is making changes over time. If I change these controls without changing time, then there's no animation. So I have to have I have to establish different values over time, and something like that. This is just random, and so when I rewind, I have my animation. And so you can certainly do that with the camera, and that's basically 3D because it gives you that sense of depth. You can actually, the camera gives you, in 2D we only have X and Y, and then in 3D they add Z. So Z is that blue line which gives you the sense of depth. And in fact, if I have the camera selected and if I go into the inspector and I go into properties and I go under position, these are some of the properties that I can manipulate. So there is Z, which is the depth. See how it's going in and out. So if you want to be precise numerically, you could actually enter numbers. You could say these are pixels. So you could say I want the camera to move 3,000 pixels behind. And then Y is up and down. And then X is left and right.
Can you also do it directly on screen? Grab those axes and move them?
Yes. Yep. You can also do that on the screen. And let me see. Yeah, there you go. So where's my camera? Actually, the camera controls are right here. Now the 3D controls come on if I select a group or a layer. And these are the 3D controls. So blue, we said that's your depth. And so you are manipulating the depth. And red, that's left and right. Now this is one thing you have to watch out with motion. As long as you have this red button on, it's actually recording. And the keyboard shortcut is A. So it messes up a lot of people who are coming from Final Cut because A is for selecting your regular select tool. So you just have to watch that. But these are really the basics of 3D manipulation. So this could be a picture, this could be any element, a shape or something that you're working on, and you can manipulate it that way. All right, so let's see what else. What else can we look at? So that was text. I'll just get rid of these guys. Now in the library we have these shapes, and so I could bring that. Again, I could make it bigger if I want. So we talked about I can keyframe, I can use behaviors and so forth, and that's good. But motion also is this cool feature where I can use audio to actually create animation. So this could actually respond to audio. So let me see if I have a file that has heartbeat. There you go. Now, audio, you can just drag it and you drop it. Now, audio, you won't see it in the canvas, obviously, but you will see it in the timeline. It's this green. So that's good. So we have some audio, and So I would like the heart to respond in sync to that beat without me having to actually do keyframes. So keep our fingers crossed. So that would be the scale. So I want it to be scaling up and down. So if I select this element and I want to find the scale parameter, and I go into properties, and there is scale right there. Now I changed the scale from the original 100%, and it's now at 161, and that's fine. If I right click on the scale and I go to add parameter behavior, and I'm going to say audio. And then motion is going to say, what is the source audio that you want to use? And there's the heartbeat. And then it's going to do some analysis. And it says, do you want it to respond to the amplitude, which is the volume? Or do you want it to respond to transients? If it was like a drum beat with transients, you can do that. If I wanted to respond to a particular frequency, in this case, maybe I could say bass, then I can do that. And then it's going to analyze, and looks like we have something happening. So imagine if you had to actually keyframe this. This would take you a long time. So without using any keyframes. So this is nice if you were doing, whether it's a music video or something that you want to quickly sync to a music beat. You can do that. By the way, you can play back this in full screen, Shift Z. And so that's what it would look like. We can come out of there. So you can do that easily. Or if you have actually a music beat, so I can let me put some text in there, and let's see what happens. F7 to bring up my floating heads-up display, and I can manipulate this. And then I'll bring up this should have an actual music bit, and I can drop that in there. Oh, I want it right from the beginning. And I want my text to start from the beginning. So the other time we used the scale. Maybe this time I can do rotation. So rotation would be this. So I want the music bit to control the rotation of this layer. So with that selected, and I go into the inspector, and I go into properties, and there's my rotation. Add parameter behavior, and I'm going to say audio. And I'm going to choose the actual track. And we'll try the bass again as well and see how that will respond. So you can do that easily. Welcome.
Thank you. Sorry to be late, but we thought we were starting at 6.
Yeah, it looks like they changed the time. Sorry about that. So do you use Motion?
It's going to be our first time, but we do have it in the suite.
Oh, in the suite. Which version do you have?
Yes.
Is it?
We have a suite.
Oh, the Final Cut suite. Okay.
I think it's part of the Motion.
Yeah, it has Motion in it. Okay.
We don't know how to use it.
Ah.
We're looking forward to it.
Well, you're in the right place.
Thank you. Apologies again.
So you can do that easily, and then you can incorporate that into your video or whatever you want to use it for. All right, let's move on. So we've talked about text. You can also do you can draw your own shapes in Motion. Some people will generate their graphics in Photoshop or Illustrator. Motion can handle that, and then so you can bring them as layers, and then you can actually manipulate them inside of Motion. But some people, if you're not a Photoshop user, you could generate shapes. So if I hit R, I can create, R is for rectangle, and I can create a rectangle just like that. And I can manipulate its properties. I can change the fill color. And I can play with opacity and so forth. Now we talked about you can easy to duplicate. If I hold down the Option key, I can make a second copy, and I can position things the way I want to. And those dynamic guides, they help you line up things. And so that will be the center. And you can also, if you wanted to, there's an option under the View menu, it says Show Rulers. So you can actually add actual rulers and guides. So if you were lining up things, if you wanted to be really precise, you could do that. And I can have one in the center, which is where 0 is. And maybe you're doing a split screen effect where you want video on different corners. You can divide up your screen any way you like. Now they will snap to those guides. Of course, I can keyframe this. I can say at the 1 second mark, which is right there. And I can start with this one. Always good to label things, so I can say rectangle left, so I don't get confused. And I'll call this one rectangle right. So when I select right, I know this one is the one that's selected. And when I select left, and if I go, so I have left selected, and if I go into properties and position and position, so I'm just taking a snapshot of those positions so it remembers. And then if I rewind to go to the beginning, which one do I have selected? Right. So we said X is left or right, so I can drag that off screen. And there's my motion path. And I can do the same thing. And so that could be my... Now when you have music, it will show up in your audio tab. And this is where you can adjust the volume, or you can mute. So if I didn't need music, I can mute. One of the nice things that you can use to enhance your sound, your motion graphics, is sound effects. So I can find a sound effect that might maybe some type of a whoosh sound. Let's see. All right, so maybe this one could work, and I can drop it. That seemed to work easily, but these shapes could have been your video, and you're doing a split screen effect. If it's too loud, I can lower the volume a little bit. If it's coming in too soon, I can adjust that.
Can you do an example of the video instead of shape?
Sure.
Real quick, if you drag the ends of the whoosh, would that cut it or would it compress the time? If you can even do that, yeah.
Yeah, because this is the whole media.
Okay.
So yeah, you can trim it, but yeah. But yeah, if I think I have some video clips. Let's go to desktop. There you go. So I can remove those, and I can import video. So just zooming out so I can see my video, and I can scale it any way I like. Let's say if I wanted it to be, I could leave it like that. And I could use another video. Oh, there's one there. Just drop it in the group, and then I need to just scale it down. Obviously, you want to be careful so that they match. Zoom in a little bit. I'm going to make sure they start at the beginning, and that starts at the beginning. And so there's your split screen effect. Let's mute the audio for now. So we click on the speaker icon. So I can keyframe this the same way. Looking at my time code, go to the 1 second mark. That layer teachers is selected, and I look at its position property. Make sure it's locked, and then the other layer, then lock its position at the 1 second mark, and then go to the beginning, and then I can change its position, select the other layer, and then change its position. And if our audio will work with that. Now, if I want, I can have them animate off screen. So I want for them to stay up to about this point. So I will lock that for this and then lock that as well and go about here. And to go up, that's the Y, so I can have it take off that way. And then I'll try this one, Y in the opposite direction. And let's see what we come up with. And now you can always deselect to hide your bounding box. And then it stays, and then it should leave the screen like that. Now, when you're done with these, you can just drag them off screen. And then we can drag this one. So that's animation. Shift Z to fit to window. Now, if you want to change the look of your video, you can also do that. Motion comes with a whole collection of filters, and we got all kinds of filters up in there. Everything, I can blur the video, and that's the circle blur, and I can. This is actually cool. If you wanted to blur someone's face, you could just apply that, and you can manipulate the position. So if they were moving, you could track their movement. One of the popular ones is the Gaussian Blur, so I can apply that. Then I can adjust the amount so it's being blurred. And I can keyframe this over time. So if I wanted the effect of the camera out of focus for a few seconds and then it goes into focus, there's the amount, and I can keyframe the amount. Let's see. So maybe it's out of focus for about there. And we put it at 100%, put a keyframe, and then we go to the beginning. Actually, I did it the opposite way. So at 1 second, I would want it to be at 0, and then I go I want it at 0, and then I go to the beginning, and then I put it at 100%. Except it's fading in. I can reset that. There you go. All right, so right there, I want the amount to be, no, I want the amount to be 0, and I put a keyframe. Then I go to the beginning, and I want it to be 100%. Yeah, so it starts out of focus, and then goes back into focus. But you have all kinds of filters, color correction. I can colorize that video and can make it any, I can tint it, I can make it any color I want. Yep. And
I noticed it's 60 frames per second as opposed to 30.
yeah, it depends on your project settings. Yeah, good observation. So there's the frame rate. So when you're setting up your project, you want it to match either your source material or what you are outputting it to. So if you're doing a 720 project or a 1080 project, you want to make sure, and it comes with these presets, so you can choose if you don't see the right preset. So these are just the popular ones. NTSC if you're doing something for standard broadcast. PAL, that's for Europe and the rest of Africa. But if you're doing an HD project, you might say, is it 720 or is it 1080, depending on the resolution that you're working on. And then you set the right resolution. If it's not there, then you can go into custom and then you can change the resolution as well as the frame rate and so forth. Now you can also do lower thirds. That's a common application where you can, so if I bring that video again, you can do basic stuff like create a shape and then you can put text in it. But you can also, so I can go into the inspector and I can choose what to fill this shape with. Right now it's being filled with color, or I could say a gradient. So I can fill it with a gradient and then I can say what type of a gradient. And you get all kinds. Industrial sky, icy blue, and so forth. If you don't like the gradient, you can actually edit it. So you can pick different colors and you can change. So I could put a green or a red. So it's very flexible. And then you can just put your text over it. Now you can also stylize a shape. It's got some really cool stuff that you can use to stylize a shape. So if I do an outline and I remove the fill, and I can just increase that a little bit. Now under shape styles you get all kinds of elements that you can use. So I could do a light streak and then you have something like that. So you can do some fancy animated. And then you can have your text or whatever you need in there. Any questions? Any other questions?
About the length, the time. Can you alter it? I want this to last 10 seconds. Once you've built it, how can you change it later?
Yeah, you can control the duration right here. Now, if you have an idea before you start,
Right.
when you go into your project properties, you can actually choose the duration. There's a duration right there.
Okay.
So I can say, so this is 10 seconds. So most motion graphics projects are not that long. It's usually a couple seconds, or depending on what it is. If it's a title, it might just be a few seconds, whether it's 5 seconds or so animation. So if you have an idea of how long it should be, you can just do the duration right in there, and then your timeline will adjust to that, rather than trying to change it after you've already started building. Some people will actually sit down and write it down like a timeline and say, at 1 second, at 3 seconds, and so forth, this is what I want it to do. The other nice thing is that you can put markers on your timeline, so they can help you to see where certain things should come in. So there's a marker right there. Shift M will place, in Final Cut, just an M would place a marker. So now I have a marker, and I can say, there's a marker right there, and I want this and that to happen right there on that, where the marker is. And what else can we do in motion? Yes?
So your lower third is incorporated into the whole of the picture. Can you have the video above the lower third and have that separate by moving the video above it, the whole picture video?
You just shrink the picture.
That's all. You just shrink the picture.
Oh, you want the video to be inside the lower third?
Or just, I guess so.
You could, another way you could do it, you could either shrink it, or you could use a mask, where if I wanted to do like a lower third like that, where it's the actual video, and it could be from the same. So let me undo that. Command Z and Command D. I can duplicate that layer. So the one that's at the top, I can mask that out. But I would have to make this one stand out. So maybe I can apply some type of a filter. Let's see here. And colorize. And then I could change its color or something. I could even blur it if I and play with the amount. And I can always put text in there. Then I can type my text on top. So that was masking. You can also do masking with text. So if I wanted to put some text, go to the text tool. I think I'm looking at some snow. I'm not saying it's gonna snow. I'm just going to distort this so it fills up. The other nice thing about motion is the way you can preview your fonts. It's got this nice live view. So while I'm going like this, I can see the font that I like, and this is nice and big. So I want the snow or these snow-capped mountains to show just through the text. So if I have the video selected, and I can say object and add mask. And Motion is going to say, what are you going to use for your mask? And I say, I already have some text. I typed in the word snow, and I'm just going to drop it in there. And now I can, I don't know if we needed that, but. So you can do creative things like that with masking. I can mute that. That was the whoosh sound. So go back to our layers.
That was keyframe, right?
Yeah, I think I had my record button going. So that, I think that gives you an idea of what you can do. Last time I did some, I was trying to create a Running Man, and I used one shape to create everything. So I distorted this to make it look like a head, and then I copied that to make like a torso. I don't know, something like that. And then I tried to make a hand. And then I can copy that. So you can do, quick animation. So this and that, I can put them in a group. And that becomes, so let's say that was our left hand. Now if I need another hand, I don't have to redraw it, so I can just duplicate that. And then that becomes my right hand. So obviously it's sitting on top of the other one, but I can move that. And now if I wanted to animate this, I can animate the whole hand. But by default, the rotation is in the middle. So I have to change the anchor point so that it's anchored right to the shoulder. And I can do that for the other hand as well. So I could actually keyframe the arm moving if I go into the inspector, properties, and there's my rotation. And let's see, and there's my rotation. I can't quite see, so maybe I can color them differently from the torso, F7. And there you go. And I can do that for the other one. Oh, they got a match. Where did I go? something like that. Now this other arm should be on the other side, so that's just the layer order. So that should be so if we go, there you go. So now that's on the other side. So with the same principles of animation, I can keyframe this and turn my record animation on, and I'll just do some random movements. And let's see what we get. So maybe if you're trying to do some cartoons or something, you can easily do that. You could actually draw your cartoons in programs like Adobe Illustrator, and then you bring those layers, and then you can animate. If I wanted him to move, then I don't have to move individual elements. I select the group, and then everything in the group is gonna move. So I can move him like that, and then I can keyframe that. That's or if I want him up and down. So the tools are there and they're powerful. So I think that's about everything I had, just to show you some of the things that you can do with motion.
Oh, does it save it automatically now?
Actually, you have to save it. Yep. So there's a save as.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Now this doesn't round trip with Final Cut 10 like what the previous motion did. Although you can create effects in Final Cut, in motion, that will be published in Final Cut 10. So you could create like an effect, you could create your own transition if you wanted to do a custom transition. And when you save it, so if I said create transition, when you save it, and you can choose the preset, is it HD, is it standard, and so forth. So your transition goes, say, from A to B. So it goes from that green to the red. But you could keyframe this. Maybe you're doing a fancy transition. Maybe something spins. You could actually keyframe that. And so Final Cut will put video. The outgoing clip will be in this part of the transition, and then the incoming clip will be in that part of the transition. So for those people who want to create custom transition, you can actually create yours. And then when you save it, it becomes part of, it will actually show up in your Final Cut library, which is really cool.
If you don't have Final Cut, is motion useless?
No, actually, if you don't have Final Cut, you can just export like a QuickTime as a QuickTime file, and you can compress it. Or if you edit with another application, you can bring that. So maybe you use Premiere or any other application. You can create your own motion graphics. It's $49, so you can't beat that. And then you can export. They have this share menu, and you can export as a QuickTime, and you get all these other export export options: YouTube, Facebook, Vimeo, CNN. So you could do a graphic and send it. You can burn it to DVD. Just all the different options that you get with Final Cut as far as sharing your project when you're done. So you could do that too. You can do green screen. I thought I was done. Let's see. Now if you shoot something green screen, you can bring it into motion. I just saw this clip.
Two Monkeys review.
And if we go into library, under filters, under keying, and there's the keyer, so I can drop it right there. Now if your green screen shot is lit up the right way, it does a pretty good. You may have to tweak it to adjust the edges, but for the most part it does a good job. If there's too much spill where the light hits the green screen and then it spills onto the person, you can neutralize that by playing with I think magenta is the opposite of green, so that's what they use to neutralize that. And so for those who shoot green screen, this is a great application where you can do that, and then you can put any other background that you want, whether it's your own video or actually Motion Library comes with all kinds of content, and then there's backgrounds, so you get all these types of backgrounds. I don't know how big this one is. So I want the background to be at the bottom. That was a white one. Let's see. So you can change the background to anything you want. I would just have to clean this up, enlarge it so we don't see the edges or something. And I can mask this other stuff out, but you can certainly do that.